All right, guys, welcome to the Lazaro Lab. This podcast is sponsored by Lazaro Nutrition and Savage Fuel. Got a metabolic monster right here. If you want to learn more, just come by. So we're starting off without Ryan because he's working. No,
people do that now?
Yeah, I guess we don't just hang out all day. But so sometimes we got to work. So right now we have a special guest who has a cool name, Matt.
It's the best one out there.
Mr. Soeth.
Right? 2/3 of the show today.
Well, we had an Oreo earlier.
We did.
Yeah.
We'll get Ryan back in here and finish the sandwich.
Yeah, exactly. Nonetheless, welcome to the show. And, I'm kind of excited to talk about what we're going to talk about. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what you do. And kind of, you've been in this space of... What would you call it? I don't want to describe it.
But essentially, it's called trust and safety, internet safety, since about 2011, so 10 years.
So Matt has been protecting you guys for the last 10 years.
Right.
Well, give us kind of like a little breakdown of kind of how that's evolved to where you're at now.
Yeah.
So roll it back, I guess.
Roll it back. I have a very unconventional background in this space. So I actually started kind of my introduction to fitness was playing basketball in college, right? So grew up in the Valley, went to Delta, went to UC Davis. I was playing basketball, traveling around, and was doing a lot of camps. Got to work out with a lot of professional athletes. Meet trainers. Like with the Warriors and the Lakers, and really began sort of my fitness journey, which is 1/10 of what we're talking about today and how you and I connected.
Yeah.
And then from there, you realize very quickly that basketball coaches don't make a lot of money. And it is a lot of work, right? No surprise. It is a lot of work at that level, highly competitive. And so I transitioned into education. And so taught from 2004 to 2015. I was the assistant principal, English teacher, video production teacher, student leadership. And that's when I kind of transitioned to the space. Trust and safety did not really exist at companies. So if you remember, like flashing back, going to MySpace, going to eventually Facebook and Twitter, like you might have like, oh, here's this really bad thing, and you hit a reporting tool and then nothing happens. And that's where, I got involved, started a nonprofit with my friend, and that started working with youth and like, hey, here's how you do good stuff online. That led to opportunities, working and advising Twitter and other tech companies on how to implement safety practices. And then launched a social media helpline in there. So we're the only social media helpline in the U.S. working with schools. Like, hey, we're having this problem. How to report it? And we're like, that's what we do. We're here to help you.
There you go.
Then from there, I got hired at TikTok. Spent just over a year and a half working trust and safety at TikTok, building that team. We went from about 12 employees to 127. And then left TikTok. I'm now at Spectrum Labs AI, looking at AI solutions and how trust and safety can work with better tech in order to detect and remove this really harmful content, which we can kind of dive into that.
Yeah, and here, speaking of harmful, look at them guns.
Right? And he just worked out, too.
Live with the Lazaro podcast.
Well, you already did
that. Ryan Lazaro.
Knock it off.
Today's special guest.
Oh, man.
Well, welcome.
He had the pre-workout. He's trying to make me look small over here. So
I had to get a pump before I came on camera. So.
We're shooting in high def today.
Don't mind me.
See Ryan's vascularity. 4K, yeah. No, probably high def because 4K is...
Hey, I like your watch.
No, the Swatch, I love it. I'm very non-techie tech.
There you
right?
go.
Going back to the 80s. Nothing like a clear colored plastic.
This is true. It was extremely trendy back then.
Right?
Yeah.
That was the thing. Like, how many Swatches did you have? Like, if you grew up in the 80s, it was you couldn't just have one.
No, you were a loser if you had one.
That's right.
Or poor like me. So
that too.
It's like, hey, give me yours.
Yeah. That's how we got ours. No. We grew up in the hood.
It has my name on it.
Yeah.
While you're drawing it on.
Okay, so back on topic. Okay, so where you left off with the kind of diving into the specifics, right? So kind of give me a little breakdown about like what that looks like right now in terms of safety and
yeah. So for right now, like with my current company, we're working across multiple platforms. So you have gaming, dating apps, and social apps, right?
So dating is in like back when we used to play Halo on
different kind of. No, you're probably used to Grindr. Like,
I have no clue what that is.
Does that have to do about meat?
How did you know?
I heard there's a lot of meat on there.
Sausage,
a lot of
pastrami.
Exactly. I see you have some insider information. So yeah, Grindr, your Tinders, your match groups, like those are all dating apps, right? When you're trying to meet people online, and particularly at that case, you're definitely working with an over 18 crowd, and so the rules that you have to implement on those platforms are different. So any given platform, let's take Facebook because they've been around the longest at this point.
Yep.
Has community guidelines, and when you any of you signed up for a social media app, there's usually a box there like, hey, do you agree to our terms? And you could select to read it, which I think the last check is Facebook's community guidelines would take you 15 business days if you were to read them end to end.
What the heck?
And so that's how like these rules are complicated. So part of the role of trust and safety that I work on is like, could we make those more digestible, easier to read, better to understand, to where you don't need a lawyer to figure out like, do I want to post a photo?
Take the cursor and I go all the way down.
Except I said I read it.
Exactly. And so that's a challenge. If you think about the rules that Facebook has are not the same rules that Tinder, Grindr, Match, and others have. It's not the same rules that League of Legends or Age of Empires, Halo, any of those others would have on there, right? Fortnite.
Yeah. Fortnite.
So that's where, like, kind of, if you look at the tech tools to detect that content, if you look at the resources on that content, like, what are the rules that we want, how we expect you to behave in this platform, like, that's the kind of stuff that we're doing in trust and safety. And my company specifically is focusing on the tech aspect of it. How do we use AI to be better at detecting that? Which we can kind of go into that a little, because it's with AI, it's not just like it's a ton of data. It doesn't mean, the Terminator's coming to destroy the world, right? It's really just
depends who you're talking to.
Also true. Is there a helicopter circuit?
Yeah, exactly.
And so one example of this, if you look at gaming, one of the most prolific places where recruiting for extremist behavior and white supremacy is happening is in games.
Really?
And so you had
that's crazy.
Call of Duty.
Rookie move by our producer.
No one put their phone on silence.
He looks like penalty burpees.
But you like games like Call of Duty, with you have your gaming headsets, you're talking voiceover, you go in the chat rooms, like that was where one of the places like a lot of this content was happening. I mean, if in the World War II version, you literally get to be Nazis and fight in that, and so you're seeing active recruitment happen in those platforms and trying to drive to other chat rooms and other places. Wow. So when you reach out to the gaming companies, it's do they have systems in place to counter that information, to redirect it, to remove it where it's inappropriate. We hear a lot of talks as a teacher and principal. You hear this all the time from your students, like the kid would jump up, say something totally inappropriate, and then they get disciplined and be like, oh, but I have freedom of speech. Well, you have freedom of speech, you don't have freedom of consequence, and hate speech is not exactly protected. I'm totally about free speech. I get the amendment, but I also think there's a lot of misunderstanding about it. The same reason you can't go into a theater and yell fire.
Yes. Yeah.
If there's no fire and people trample each other, like you're liable for that. And so trying to think as we look at, online speech laws, it's companies are consistently working to try and find ways, how do we limit that harmful speech in order to encourage discussion? And we're seeing the good and the bad of that happening right now, right? And we saw it in the 2016 election, the 2020 election, particularly around politics.
What? No.
Right? No. It never happens. Everyone gets along, sunshine, rainbows, and ponies. And then you're seeing it, not just on politics, you're seeing it around the arts, you're seeing it around celebrities, you're seeing it around everyone. You have to be aligned with a specific ideal. And you're seeing it, people kind of polarizing either through the algorithm of the platform itself, like that's come up a lot, or you're seeing it just like we're self-selecting, like I'm only going to watch Fox News, or I'm only going to watch CNN. Yeah. And people are kind of finding their tribe and what they want to believe in or buy into, and then really creating that myopic or narrow view of their world as they see it and how they perceive it.
Well, those platforms are essentially designed to keep feeding you the things that keep you engaged, whether it's something that you like
that's
or
the basic,
something
right?
that you dislike, right?
Yeah.
So if you dislike it, you're still going to continue to engage in the things that you dislike, just as you're going to continue to consume the things that you like. And so it's weird.
We're seeing that this week. Facebook, Wall Street Journal did multiple articles on Facebook this week. And in one of the articles, they actually talked about how they knew, this is going back to 2016, they were kind of directing people a specific direction, and they'd become aware of it. Facebook has since done a lot to move away from that. But at the time, that's where you started to see a lot of these groups coming in, memes coming in, and these essentially coordinated attacks. So you have at any point in time in the Ukraine and Mexico and Brazil and the Philippines, these click farms that exist. And the sole purpose of these groups is to create meme content, divisive content that then they put out on forums like Reddit or 8chan, if you follow the whole QAnon thing, right? And that's all they do is they put this content out and then they put it in your feed, send it to you as an email, and you're like, of course I agree with that. I'm angry. And then you click on it and you share it. And the next thing you know, you have these memes are going viral, and it was created by someone who really didn't even live in this country.
That's
2020 election. One of my favorite stories I like to share is we're meeting with this meme expert, and she was talking about extremism in politics. And there were 2 Reddit channels they were following. And in those channels, they were able to identify, they couldn't make the exact connection, but they knew whoever was making memes in support of Trump and whoever's making memes in support of Bernie Sanders, were using almost the same fonts, same font colors, same stylistic choices.
Oh, that's the same people.
In both cases, going
a few
after
words.
Biden.
Yeah.
And so you have 2 camps saying Biden is evil, but coming at it from different angles, but producing similar content. And then you're seeing both of those memes getting shared out on social media.
Wow.
And so that's where this is where conspiracy theory, like you want to be careful as you backtrack stuff, because you could totally go off the deep end and build a tunnel in your backyard and like hoard pickles and grapes and whatever else you want. But then you start to like, okay, what's the incentive? Why are people trying to do this? What do they gain from it? And then you start to look at potential bad actors. Like what is the benefit of disrupting that process?
Wow. You're blowing my mind. I know we've talked about a lot of this too already, but I don't know.
It gets intense. Like, if you want to, there's a great book called "This Is Not Propaganda," which looks at practices from the Cold War, from the UK to Russia, and then from our Radio Free Europe and other media forms, right? Thinking like radio, television, broadcasting, communism, socialism versus democracy, and how both sides have kind of used messaging in order to persuade one side or the other. That part isn't new. That media literacy piece has been around for a very long time.
Yeah.
But how we apply it to online platforms, like that's the part that's new.
Because right now the form, these viral memes essentially that are rooted in creating such a strong visceral response in the hearts of what people's firm belief systems are. It's where it's triggering like this cascading effect of cult-like following and all spectrums. I would say like it's interesting. I mean, this is honestly why when I use social media, I don't consume much of it at all. I produce a lot of content, but don't really consume any. Very few, unless someone's.
Well, that's a
messaging
good gut check factor. If you see something on social media and your initial reaction is like anger, Hulk mad, then immediately that's your point. Like, wait a minute, why is this making me upset? Should I be sharing this? Is it true?
Well, it's
Can
so
I
fast.
fact check that?
They set it up to where you can reshare something and just literally.
like that.
So you're like, yes, I agree with this. Blah blah blah.
And that's where you start to see kind of these interventions in place. Like Twitter put something in where it limits your ability to share an article unless it knows you've read it. Right, so
so you can't just click and go.
Exactly. Or you'll click it and you get a notification, like a nudge, they'll call it, but a notification that says, hey, you didn't read this. Are you sure you want to share it? Because people are sharing off the headlines, right? The whole clickbait, click traffic.
More to the story. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's bad for business, guys.
What about what about the disinformation type of thing that they're pursuing? Like, this is misinformation, blah blah blah, and do you have any insight on the fact checking that's going on?
Yeah,
right?
so there's an international fact checking network.
Yeah.
There's several groups that are part of it in multiple countries, and they all have a set of standards. And the standards are like transparent. They're published on their site. The challenge with the fact-checking network is disinformation, misinformation gets shared so quickly that it's really hard to figure out what's going on. The bigger challenge is really looking at media outlets, not blaming journalism or media in general, but if you look at, there are, from 50 years ago, 3 major news outlets, from print to TV, to now hundreds. You really don't have local journalism anymore, even here, locally owned papers, because they're just getting priced out of the market. So you're getting these national syndicates, and then a lot of them, what sells is that 24-hour news cycle. And so you have that 24-hour news cycle, you're sharing stuff, you're pushing out information. There's no benefit financially because you lose viewers if you're not talking about something.
Yeah.
So there's no benefit to be like, oh, let's find out if this is true.
Yeah.
Right? They're just kind of cutting it off.
Keep going.
And so I think that's the point is as we start to look at this is if people could just pause, which is hard to do, and figure out what is the sources this coming from. Is it highly generally conservative view? Is it highly liberal view? And then being able to step back and think about, okay, what is it they're trying to share with us? And we're not getting the facts and full information anymore.
Do you see social media moving into a space where they will start asking us to put our IDs and our connect the profile to someone's, identification to track people better? And, basically, people have, it's easy for people to speak because they're anonymous.
To an extent.
To a degree. Some apps have that, right?
Yes.
Now, here's the thing, like if you're really tech savvy, it would not be hard to figure out who someone is.
Oh, yeah.
If you really want to,
A lot
right?
of the times, like even with Twitter, you don't have to, but there's options of logging in with your phone number.
Oh, yeah.
Different stuff like that. So I think in the end, they know who you are.
Right, yeah. Particularly if you're posting like harmful content or malicious information, other stuff, like they're able to shut it down.
Yeah, you're going to get flagged.
Yeah. No, it's good stuff. And that's what kind of like my work, with youth is looking more like mental health, digital well-being, things like that, media literacy, misinfo, disinfo, online safety, and then transitioning everything from eating disorder content to suicide prevention, hate speech, minor safety, it's more focused like CSAM, child sexual abuse material, and online trafficking. So there's a wide range of stuff that's happening in platforms that they're having to respond to. And if you look at it, it's all stuff that's been happening offline for a very long time.
Yeah.
It's just changing the environment.
I think people don't even consider or even think about that content being filtered out or anything of that nature because there's just so much stuff you come by like, well, what? I don't think that's appropriate. And like, look at this, but.
And that's a good reaction, right? Like if you're not looking for it, right? It's like I'm online going like, where are all the predators at?
Yeah.
Then you're not going to find it. You're not going to be really aware of what's going on.
But I say, you dig deep enough and you'll come across some unfortunate stuff.
So what are some of the things that you guys look at to get a feel of how people are emotionally on social media?
Emotionally is a bit tougher, so it might be specific words or word phrases that they put together, search history. There's a lot of indicators in there. So if I'm on any of the social platforms, and for example, if I type in the word suicide, it's going to take me to a resource page with help to deal with anything with suicide. Do I need to contact a helpline? Do I call 911 because I'm about to do something really bad?
Yeah.
So those things are put into place. Pretty much every platform has some version of that.
That's good.
So those are kind of the good things. Like eating disorder stuff, I've been passionate because you work with teens, like this stuff comes up, right? So like at TikTok, one of the biggest ones we had was banning nutrition ads on the platform, right? Because as you know, we talked about this a lot, like the amount of dietary stuff, like 4 years ago, when I first started working together, the amount of keto ads I saw on Facebook, I'm like, dear Lord, everyone's a keto expert. Like, stop putting butter in your coffee. Come on now.
Yeah.
But like every ad was like for some kind of cauliflower crust pizza or, butter coffee or, eating a pound of bacon or, melt the bacon and make a milkshake. Like it was anything to like increase your fat content. And I'm like, it's driving me nuts. So at TikTok, we just kind of took a stand like, hey, we're not going to have those videos anymore. And then other platforms started to follow because that triggering, if you have a legitimate mental health issue when it comes to weight and body image.
Is that specific to ads?
That is specific to ads.
Yeah, because like the things that go viral are still the idiotic things that we talk about, that I review. It's like, I was wondering, like, at what point would it be too much to say that needs a label when they're making those claims? Because those are legitimately claims. They're making medical claims basically, and that's like,
and they're not doctors, they're not scientists,
no,
they're not
at all.
Yeah.
They're not referencing anything. They're making medical claims, and there's no filtration in that sense. And so it's like, they want to filter certain things and not that one. And obviously, I'm biased towards this because it's what I do for a living. But like, just as you said, like from an eating disorder standpoint, did we talk about that on one of the podcasts? No, not yet.
Not really eating disorders yet. We should.
I think I
cover
talked about that. Oh, I think that was just a conversation I had. But like the prevalence of things, yeah, I feel like I have. That's all I do.
Welcome to the
Talks
brain
to
of
himself
Matt.
a lot.
Yeah. I literally just
Looks in the mirror.
just talking to myself half the freaking time. So, like, particularly, the specifics between even being able to identify the differences between like anorexia and bulimia or binge eating disorder.
Bigorexia.
Bigger. Well, there are versions, and so this is the thing. I remember seeing this one TikTok go pretty viral about this girl was saying that if you work out to not get fat, then you have an eating disorder or something to that extent. And it was like, I don't know, 100 million like hits, and then but then the reshares were like
even more,
or like the duets or whatever they're called. And it was funny. I was thinking. I was like, well, she's kind of right. Like, and generally, I want to disagree with people that make those types of claims. But the context, if you think about the general population, right, not the people that actually do things with layers to it, in the sense of, they're addressing this part of their health, this benefits them in this way, and there's these other positive things. Whereas the root of most people's pursuit of weight loss is usually rooted in some type of pain and regret and remorse or self, like they don't like themselves, right? And
Their actions are based on like fear of something.
it is, yeah. And we've touched on that. Like the majority of people's actions that they take is rooted in fear-based, in fear, and pretty much, and that's it. And when you're responding like that, you're looking for something that makes you feel good. And the interesting thing, like I learned about anorexia, is that when they are consuming, like they have an innate ability to look at food and determine what has the lowest fat content, which would decrease their total calories. And when they do that and they eat it, they actually get a dopamine response. So even though they're eating so few calories that they're literally, to an extent, starving themselves, they don't feel bad. There's no bad,
Like physically or mentally? Or
both, yeah, because they usually have excessive amounts of exercise involved with that too.
So they're constantly releasing more dopamine on top of that.
Yes, and then on top of that, their self-perception of what they actually look like is completely different. Whereas someone with a binge eating disorder or bulimia, they feel the excitement to eat prior to eating. Whereas
But
the
not
anorexic,
satisfied with consuming.
exactly, and it's followed by guilt, remorse, and all these negative emotions, and so it's this cycle that they experience. And so interestingly enough, the intervention sometimes can be pharmaceutically enhanced because you're balancing out hormones like ghrelin, leptin, or using other medications that help, very similar to like an SSRI or something like that, to help with balancing out, serotonin or dopamine response.
Yeah.
So the funny thing is like you end up like having those extremes, right? And I wonder, like, are they even? I know that's like way off the left from what we were just talking about, but is the pursuit of identifying those patterns in what they're detecting through technology, is that what they're doing, like, so far?
Yeah, that's
so
exactly it, right? So everything you just described, like, platforms are listening for.
Yeah.
And so think about how good are the tools that platforms are using to listen, to pick up those indicators, to be like, oh, this person needs help. I think what you described is perfect. Like, one of the groups we work with is NEDA, National Eating Disorder Awareness organization, and they do exactly what they come in as the experts. Like, the platforms are not the experts, and they say, here's the type of language you should use, here's the type of content you should moderate. Because we know if I come in and see a video exactly like you described, and I am prone to eating disorder issues, then that video is going to have an impact on me and could either send me down a bad path or send me searching for other content that's not going to be very healthy for me.
Yeah.
It's a definite mental illness, mental issue that some people have around food and the relationship with food and eating and body perception and everything else. Similarly, content, like the biggest thing you see is like body shaming, right? Like, people making comments about celebrities or others about how they look or not look. Have they eat too much? Do they not eat enough?
Yeah, there's so much of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And conversely, I think you've seen too a shift in society focusing more on wellness and less on specific attributes. Like if you're skinny, you're fit, or if you're fat, you're unfit.
Yeah.
And trying to dial in like what does it mean to be healthy? What are the different indicators? How do we get people to think about our relationship not only with food, with ourselves? And that is a definite struggle I think most people deal with at some point in their life. It's just part of being human. And so as a platform, who are the experts that we work with? What are the guidelines we have in place? It starts with policy, community guidelines we talked about at the beginning. Once you get the policy in, then it's like, how do we enforce that? What does it look like? And then being able to pivot, because humans are smart. If you've ever, as soon as like they know the rules, if there's something they want to do, it's like, how do we get around the rules? And then trends pop up, things happen, and then it's like, right, as a platform, like, how do we respond to this? And that's where these partnerships come in, because they're like, they're listening and say like, oh, we see this thing that's happening. You mentioned earlier at the start of this conversation, like labels.
Yeah.
So Twitter did a study not too long ago, and they started using labels on certain posts and found out that labels had almost zero impact, because when people see it, they're like, all right, who made this label? Who put it on there? Why do you not want me to read this? Maybe it is true. And so that really feeds in.
Yeah.
Right? Think about every time you were told no.
Yeah.
Well, I can't do that. I'll show you.
I think that's a general response for humans in general. It's like you start to question. You're like, well, what's this ulterior motive right here, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, there's a huge concern, I would say, that all this like data that's being collected is being used for evil too. From a social, from the company standpoint.
It totally is. I'm kidding. It's not.
Well,
so there are rules in place, right? So, for example, and it's different in every country. So Europe has the GDPR, which has a lot of data privacy built into it. So in Europe, you have right to be forgotten. So I can go to Google and say, hey, the stuff that you find about me, I don't want it on there anymore. And Google has 30 days to take it down.
Okay.
We don't have that here yet.
We don't have that.
Yeah.
But what you do have here is you have companies that you can hire who can like scrub the web, do stuff like that. You can delete profiles from the platform. So if I go into Facebook and delete my account, they have 30 days to get rid of that content.
Yeah.
Similarly, where's the data stored? So almost every American company, their data stored here in the US. You have either cloud-based solutions, these massive server farms. They're strategically placed throughout the US. They're intentionally not publicly listed, because then it keeps other entities to do stuff. But then you have backup servers, right? Because nothing's worse than having like, oh, here's 10 years of my life on social. The server fails. And then you're like, those 10 years are gone. You're like, how do I rebuild that? So you'll have like backup servers. You may have stuff in, say, like Singapore is a very popular location for backup redundancy, or you may have spots in Europe. But then you have to consider like regulation. What do the laws say? So if I'm sending data back and forth between here and Germany, there are certain things in place that says what I can and cannot share, what information can go out. And then who has access to that data? Almost every company has protocols in place where no one person can get full access to all of that data.
Okay.
And so you have sign-offs. So maybe I can see this part, you can see this part, you can see that part, and then we all look at it, we get together for whatever project we're doing, and we share it out. If you remember, the big one a few years ago was Cambridge Analytica, and a lot of private information got out. And we had a chance to Google it. It was Facebook and a bunch of others. They're trying to track something. And basically what they're saying is they used it to manipulate a lot of things. And what happened is the checks and balances in the background is no one anticipated how much data they would get from this, how it would be collected, how it would be evaluated. And that was like a big red flag. The government and other groups were like, wait a minute, what are your data practices in your company? How do we protect this? And so since then, you've seen a lot of shifts in not only data privacy, data security, and a lot of tech companies that deal in large amounts of data. But then how do we anonymize it, and how do we make sure that it can stay protected and doesn't get leaked out?
Yeah. Hold on one sec.
We're getting close to the 30-minute mark, so we could take a quick break. I'm going to stop the camera and start again.
Right,
okay.
Let's see that, yeah. And we're back. But you will know that we disappeared. No. The government was coming after us because we're diving too deep. They can't keep us quiet. Exactly.
Skynet is
They're trying to keep us. Skynet, yeah. Yeah, no, it's fascinating, getting your perspective, because it's kind of funny just reading things here and there. Like I said, I don't consume much on purpose, or when I'm looking for something, I specifically look for just that, and then I like start filtering through things, and it's I don't think very many people look through information the way I look through information. That's the problem. Not to say I do it better, but I have a very specific intent and purpose. And, I don't look at information to be right. I look at it to know what is right, and otherwise it's really hard to go down this road of like doubling down, because you don't want no one to think you're wrong. And that's why it's like, especially when I'm putting out content, it's also really thought out, because it is, I think it's just such a huge issue where you just have crap coming out, garbage in, garbage out, basically. But
there's enough of that.
Yeah, there is enough of that. But I want to go back to the you said the recruitment of white supremacists. That is crazy. So how would they know that they're not trying to recruit me? Because I definitely wouldn't qualify as a white supremacist.
Well, they would look at these recruiters are highly sophisticated, right?
Yeah.
And we've seen that on multiple platforms. Like they kind of know what kind of words to use.
Yeah.
They might test the waters. Super sophisticated.
Because if you spend enough time on Xbox Live, like it sounds like most people are white supremacists.
Right?
I'm just pretty bad on there.
Yeah, or especially way back in the day. But
way back in the day, yeah.
Well, when there was not like specific chats for the actual. It was like open chat for all 18 people playing. That was pretty hilarious, actually. I know it's not like that anymore, but so these people have enough tech, and they're savvy enough to actually pursue it in that with that. That's really fascinating. I just didn't think it was a thing.
When you hear that, it kind of blew me away as well. But as you talk to, again, there are experts out there. Like their whole job is to listen to stuff. So there's actually a guy in Germany who has collected the largest database of white supremacy, fascism music, and then was using that to compare to it. So like, for example, like on a platform like TikTok where you have a lot of video and music together, then you can scan all the music that gets uploaded, use an audio filter, and you can match it to those songs that have been identified or flagged as being like white supremacist fascist music.
Do they also, are they finding other extremists use the same recruiting techniques?
Most definitely. They have for a long time. Yeah. If you look at the Taliban, in the Middle East, like you saw a huge amount.
Wasn't there a movie that highlighted that, where they were using certain video online games to recruit people in America to do terrorist acts? There was a movie.
It sounds familiar though.
Yeah, it was really, and then they used that game to communicate through.
Yes,
also
I remember what you're talking
get
about,
around that. Yeah, that was really crazy.
There's like a chat room within the game.
Yes, yeah.
Could have
and
been
then they would use like that. I think that was. Yeah. Well, I think I just mixed up two different things actually.
Genres.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Anyways, but it's not only the crazy white people doing it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
No, it's. I think that's just one example that's easy to relate to here, right? But no, you're seeing it in any type of extremist group, religious cults, political groups, other countries. They're using games, they're using chat rooms, there's all types of ways that they can engage off grid.
Isn't the army using Twitch to recruit people?
Yeah, well, remember they came out with a game, right?
They came out with games.
They came out with a gaming team.
Yeah,
that were playing and using games like Call of Duty to recruit more people in the military.
Well, that was back in the 2000s when they actually released.
But they would bring gaming trucks to high schools.
Yeah.
Right, so you could play like during lunchtime and other stuff.
Is that unethical? Like that's the question. I think that's the question. It's like to recruit somebody in that manner. Where does it become unethical? Obviously, if you're a white supremacist or any type of extremist, it's obviously unethical because the end goal is to harm somebody, right? But like, is it unethical on all the other in any other? I don't know. Like in the army, like
I think. I mean, that's a great question, right? You look at. Rare is the moment where everyone's like, oh, screw veterans. The Army, we're not going to do this. Like, I don't think most people believe or think that. Not 100%, right? So, but if you look at recruiting tactics, I think a lot of people did call that out. And you notice that they don't use that gaming anymore. They still have other means to kind of get in front of people. But no one, at the end of the day, no one's too upset about the military because whatever you want to say about it, in any way, shape, or form, you're not really thinking about bad things at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
And like for me, like as a teacher, I know I had friends that I taught with. They're like, "Oh, why are you letting the recruiters in your room? Like, it's really bad." And I'm like, "I don't know if you noticed, but 70% of my kids like are not paying for college, and so if they're ever going to leave this town and go somewhere, like military is going to pay for their college." And most of my friends who joined the military, I only had a few that went to Afghanistan, and thankfully they came back. Most of my friends, one like worked as a recreation officer down in South America and ran a bowling alley for 4 years. Like he wore a Hawaiian shirt to work every day.
Yeah.
So if you think about opportunities, costs, what is the goal, the main drive of the group, their mission.
Absolutely.
That's for me where moralistically I try and figure out that line, and what is the opportunity that they're going to provide. Very different from my dad's generation where you got a number and you joined the military regardless. Right?
Yeah.
And it was like you're playing the lottery like once a year.
Gosh.
And my dad, like same thing, dad's generation, I think almost every one of them, they can tell you their draft number, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I mean, that was a very pivotal moment for them. It's like, oh, well, I guess we're going.
Yep. And it was like that Vietnam era, that generation, very different viewpoint of military and service and country, and and you're seeing some of those conversations happening now in terms of how we approach that. So I don't think games in that respect, again, for me, I think what that does highlight is how nuanced and difficult these conversations are.
They are.
And my number one frustration with everything that we've talked about is we're at this point, and you'll see it happening. You're either a white hat or a black hat. You're either with us or you're against us.
Yeah.
There's no middle. There's no nuance. It's either you're all in here or you're all in here. And you're seeing it on news outlets. You're seeing it on social media pages. You're seeing it in groups. You're seeing it with brands who are trying to align. So for most recently, it was a story about Salesforce who offered to relocate all of their employees from Texas because of the recent laws that Texas passed. And like, if you don't agree with that, we'll relocate you to another part of the country and pay for it on our dime. And some people coming out going like, hey, we love that the company aligns itself with the cause and we want to support that. And you have others are going like, you're crazy, like who cares?
Yeah.
People not living in Texas who are angry about Texas. And that's just like one specific example, but I think it's that when you step back, like what is the law that's trying to get passed? Who's trying to pass it? What is the means to it? What is the language behind it? And as objectively as possible, because I often catch myself getting angry and I'm like, wait a minute, like why am I upset right now?
Yeah.
And then trying to break down and look at it and really step back from watching a lot of news or watching certain networks, because I know that I'm just going to get upset at how dumb I think people are. And that is 100% my bias. And thankfully, we almost broke the board there. That was close. That was a good save. And so it's how do I focus my attention on the things that are relevant to me, that impact my world, and focus and give my time to that. So I'm just not always walking around in a state of rage.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the problem. Like, what would you recommend? Because, I kind of describe what I do to stay out of the state of rage constantly. I mean, are there some actual guidelines or general recommendations that are being offered to people? Is there anything that's coming across these platforms that how they're? I mean, because it would kind of be bad for business essentially for them though, because then people would engage less, right?
Well, I mean, from a platform standpoint, I think for me, if you're going to use a platform, what is the value you get out of it, right?
Yeah.
Is it staying connected to family, or their short form? Like with TikTok, I watch cooking videos all the time. Like that's one of my favorite things on there. And then I think
when you send them to me, I end up going down the rabbit hole of cooking stuff.
Oh my God.
I see all your posts.
Oh man, it makes me hungry.
Oh no, I'll do. Yeah, I got a video I got to post today. I roasted some hatch peppers last night, so I need to finish that one off. But then I'll have like hatch peppers for the next 6 months. Awesome. But like that part is fun, right? Or I'll do like biking videos because I love and the comedy videos are just phenomenal. There's some great talent on there.
Yep.
And I find myself like, I'm gonna look up this one thing, and I lose 20 minutes of my life.
Yeah.
And so like that.
Easy.
But it's fun, right? Like I enjoy that, but I know other individuals like spend way more time on that app because it's just what they like. So as you're going into these apps, I think you're right. Most people, about 70% generally consume versus create. And so if you're going to be consuming that content, think about, you can set limits on your phone. Either if you have Apple or Android, you can set screen time limits.
My phone notifies me.
And in TikTok, there's a little umbrella, and on that umbrella, it's like a wellness feature. You click on that and say, hey, I only want to spend 30 minutes a day in here, and it'll set off a timer and cut you off at 30 minutes.
No, get me
But
back
you have
on.
to go out of your way to look for those things technically.
Oh, no, you totally do. Most people don't know about it.
Yeah. Because like I looked for all of those things on every single app to notify me when I hit that 20-minute mark.
Yeah.
because I know if I can't get all my work done in 20 minutes online, I am just wasting time.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll choose to waste time.
And you can download stuff like Google Chrome has a web extension that'll block social media apps and other stuff like productivity apps. So those things are out there. For me, social media doesn't add value. And a lot of the apps that I'm on, I don't use very often because I need it for my work. I don't really need it for anything else, so I find myself not spending time there. For other apps, like it's very relevant to my work, so I'll spend a lot of work time there, like say LinkedIn, for example. But then, I'm out once my day is done, like I just kind of shut it off. And then personally, like I'll take my screen time. I'll be like, all right, I spent, let's say 5 hours a day on my phone this week. Next week, I'm going to cut that by 10%. That's realistic. So I'm going to cut back an hour and a half or whatever. And then on Sunday, I'll come around and get the notification, like, did I hit my goal?
You're like, I was 20% over.
Usually more likely true.
Yeah. It depends on what's going on.
So, and then other stuff is education. So groups like, namely, National Association of Media Literacy, like they have guidelines on what you can do, like vetting the source, things like that. Websites like Trend Micro has a check the link feature. So if you're worried about something being spam, something like that, you can like paste it in there. It'll tell you. NewsGuard has this huge database of like media literacy, like fake news articles, right? So they've tracked and identified like which websites historically post. Not only producing, resharing. Like you'll see, like the funniest one. I was talking to a parent this week, and their kid was like, "Did you hear about the white van going around taking kids?" And I started laughing. And we both are laughing. She's like, "That was the same rumor we had when we were kids too. Like it hasn't, because in the 80s, every movie was like a white van like taking kids." And so we're kind of laughed about like, how did this start getting spread? Where did it come from? And so when you think about media literacy and trends and those kind of things, is then kind of backwards looking, because you can search an image to see if it's been changed. You can search a link to see who the source is. There's a lot of ways. What I think is most people are just lazy.
I like how sometimes Facebook will notify you when the meme was created. And it's all, this was made in 2014, blah, 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 and it was first shared on this day. And then, but it's weird. It's weird, though. I don't see it happening all the time. Even when I'm seeing things that I'm like, this is 100% something that's viral. Like, I keep seeing that.
And that's where the tech comes in. Either A, is it a person manually seeing this data and then labeling it? B, is there enough tech in place where that image is getting placed in a database and then it scans it and does it automatically?
Because here's the thing. I try not to consume much media at all, including things about politics. But wasn't something happening recently that the White House and Facebook were doing, kind of like looking for what was it? Something to do with COVID, of course. Like
there's always that
the disinformation thing, like where they were.
You have. So like the World Health Organization, CDC, and other groups have like their guidelines on COVID. So every website that you have has, if you search COVID, it'll pop up, it'll take you to an information page. And it'll only come from like those like medical sources. So you'll see, it could be like Providence Health is big in California, Oregon, and Washington. So you might see something from Providence Health, or you might see like specific CDC guidelines on XYZ. So they'll have that.
No, but I don't know. It's just hearsay. That's why I'm wondering if you know. But they were saying that the White House specifically wanted to pursue certain people that were producing certain content.
Well, that I'm not aware of.
I don't know if it's because a lot of times what you end up hearing is one side of one side of someone's general like bias, right? And then they're going to be like, well, that's what's happening. It's like, well, I don't know. Is that really what's happening? So that's always like the scary part about that. It's like, are they really pursuing these people and taking them off for whatever reason?
Well, that conversation. So are you specifically going after conservative sources and like shutting them down? And that's where you're seeing like Texas and Florida trying to pass laws of, if you remove my content and I don't feel like you should, then I can appeal that and I can sue the company. Or you're starting to see some states pass laws that if Facebook publishes something, or Twitter or anyone else, that it ends up being harmful, can we then sue the platform? So you can go on, or I can go onto Facebook and be like, I hate this group of people and they're terrible, and did you know that they blah blah blah? And if Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or TikTok or anyone doesn't take it down fast enough, then I, as the person who got harmed, can then sue the platform and they could be responsible. It'd be like if I walked out to the building out there, and this is a very old analogy, and like spray painted, I hate, insert group of people here, then could, this building then get sued. The owners of the building get sued because they didn't take that down, and therefore people locally felt harmed by that content, making them feel unsafe. And so therefore it's your fault because you allowed it to stay up on the side of your building.
What do you know about Section 230, which it's kind of like an internet act where...
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what it is, yeah.
Yeah, because they're supposed to treat social media basically like the telephone, your water, because it's a public utility. Everybody has to have a right to use it. If the presidents are there, a lot of political figures are on there, so it's become a public square. That's what they call it, a public square. So where do you differentiate when they're taking people down, whoever it is, whatever reason it is, like? Don't they have a right to appeal that too?
So every platform, Section 230, and I'm not the expert, so this is very much the Cliff Note version. And I don't recommend you look it up on Wikipedia. That will not give you enough. But basically what Section 230 says is I, as the platform, have created a space that anyone can come and talk, and then I'm going to create rules on how you can talk on that platform. Now, you and I versus, say, the president have very different rules. Yeah. Right? And one of the arguments that I made, when Trump was president is everyone's like, well, take him down, he's doing this. I'm like, well, if it's harmful, and they started to see it towards the end of his presidency, but like he's a public figure. If he's really going to say something terrible, right, then it needs to be out there. If he's going to say something good, then it needs to be out there.
Well, yeah.
We should have access to that.
Yeah, you want to know what they're about.
Right.
Yeah, like otherwise you're kind of like preventing people from realizing what they're actually saying.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, similarly for senators, for congressmen, even celebrities, right? The rules are a little bit different as a public figure, so you tend to get a little bit more freedom to be a little critical, right? Like the UK in Britain, they take this very seriously because you can go to Parliament and stand there and like scream across the room at your representative if you want to. Like those are the best. Like if all politics was like that, it'd be its own reality show.
Ooh.
But here it's like they, that open forum, that discussion, it's that line of when does it start to become harmful, so like attacks on people, things like that. That's where I think a lot of people become uncomfortable in terms of what they're doing.
So the way they're creating a possible correlation is looking at when it was said in correlation with things that are happening. I mean, that's
general speaking, it's looking at the context. Is it directed at a person or group? Is there a specific threat or harm, or am I more just kind of like shouting it out?
Well, because I mean, the argument can be made is like you can be very ambiguous about something and people can interpret it in their own way.
Right.
Also.
And that's where context is huge.
Yeah. And so like at what point, where is that? That's a funny line to walk, basically, I would say.
And that's where a lot of people want to reform Section 230, to your question, are really looking at is like, how do we do a better job of regulating this? And we're seeing a lot of effort. Europe in particular has been very forward on this in terms of how do we start to regulate speech, how do we hold companies accountable. They would like to see more regulation and content taken down that is deemed harmful. And the platforms themselves, I guarantee there's not a platform that says like we want to limit free speech. Like that is not their intent, and it would scare the heck out of them. Like they don't want to be the speech police.
Well, I mean, like with Section 230 is that it gives them the freedom for people to post things on there so they don't get sued. So basically, something happens because somebody said something on that platform that then, they're able to get away. Like, okay, well, we're
the platform, that's one part of it.
Exactly, the cry shouldn't happen on Facebook. But, Facebook didn't take any of the blame for that at all. There was no legal action against them or anything. So, so it comes, it's a very blurry line where, you have people that say things and then they have a right to say them, but Section 230 is very specific. You have to be a public company, but they're kind of being like publishers. They're telling you what to post and what not to post. So so it's not so much of a free speech anymore. It's basically they're saying they're a public company, but at the same time they're acting as a publisher.
Right.
So how do we fix that? To be more specific, do you mean like make specific rules and then if I can't say those things that I accept that, but you got to tell me a specific rule that I got to follow. instead of guessing, figuring it out as certain, like you said, certain people get different treatment.
Well, and I think too, yeah, that's always been a frustration. I noticed there's a huge argument in this country against like what's fair and what's equitable, right? Like that's been going on forever. My kids struggle with that one daily.
I think all children struggle with that.
So two things with that. One is you're seeing safety by design as a new principle coming out, looking at 230. Like what are at a minimum, what are the tools? Like, because there's certain laws that companies have to follow, right? Like certain things they have to report, certain tools they need for reporting in there. And you saw a lot of them were bare minimum, particularly early days in tech. If you're trying to 10x your investment within a year or two, then you're building an app as fast as possible. You're not thinking about user safety. And so now there's a shift coming. You've seen a lot of reactive measures coming in and like what tools are in place, what things do we need, because humans are incredibly complicated. I think most people show up at a platform or place like they want to follow the rules, they kind of do the right thing, but you always have some bad actors who kind of want to either poke the bear, cause some trouble, see what they can get away with. And so as a platform, and these systems are in place, like, yes, like we're a publisher, but then do we have reporting tools? Do we have our guidelines? Are they public knowledge? Do we have a moderation process? Is there an appeal process? What do we allow or not allow on the platform? What does that look like? How do we support users? And then what is my incentive? If I'm going to be regulated more as a platform, I'm more likely to take action. And I think that's where the push is coming now, is how do we insert more of that regulation and revise Section 230? To this point, had we not had Section 230, I do not know if we would have had these platforms at all. Like they would have been shut down pretty quick.
Oh yeah, that sounds like,
because there's craziness.
People get
and there's if you want to go, there's a great case study from the late 2000s, FormSpring. Right, and you see these peer-to-peer friend boards, and it was the Wild West of tech, where people were just posting the craziest stuff.
I remember
didn't
those.
even have to be true.
No.
And next thing you know, it'd be like, oh, I know that person. They're a pedophile, and they're not. They're just angry. And next thing you know, like police are investigating
goes back
you.
To, like,
and
the 8chan thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's a whole can of worms right there. But
and totally, if you look at it, a few years ago, that was a big thing, right? If everyone on the internet, if we just gave you all the information, could you make up your mind, right? Like it's very like sci-fi, Brave New World, Aldous Huxley. Let's have everyone give the information, and we're seeing like the world's going crazy. Much more different than Orwell, 1984. Well, let's control the information, government messaging. I still think we're a little more like Fahrenheit 451. Like honestly, I hated these books in school, but now I'm just like, they're so smart.
They're so smart. Exactly.
But like we're censoring ourselves. That was the whole premise of Fahrenheit 451. Is everyone's just like, oh, well, you're not allowed to think. You think differently from me. I'm gonna shut you down and not give you a platform. And that's what we're seeing now. Is if people have a message counter to what everyone is sharing, it's how do you get to the point of like, all right, we know this message is harmful. Do we limit that person? But then the second you do that, everyone's like, well, wait, why are you stopping them from speaking? We want to hear it.
Like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
what's it becomes intriguing almost. Like, oh, that's the forbidden fruit. Like they're censoring them because they're right. And then there's a double down again. Yeah, that's man. That is. This topic is so like deep. It really is. It's like it's like speechless.
Definitely learned a lot.
Yeah.
Exactly. It gets complicated fast. So
it definitely does. Well, what about? Okay, so currently with what you're doing in those with the company you're currently with, what is the weirdest thing that you're seeing right now in terms of the dating apps?
Dating apps.
Because I've never experienced, fortunately I've been married for a very long time, never had to deal with that crap.
That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Why do you have Grindr on your phone?
It's a meat grinder.
No, so is it to prevent what is the purpose? Like what the heck happens on there? Like that's what I'm wondering.
Well, I mean, I can't speak like a huge amount to that, having never used any of them per se. But it's more anytime you introduce a situation where you're connecting people, right? And there's some kind of like social transaction, like we're meeting, we're talking, is really being mindful of like what types of phrases people are using, how you're reaching out to people. If people are getting together, is that encounter safe?
I mean, it sounds like a way that predators of all facets can actually pursue people.
Conceivably, and you don't see a ton of that on there. You might see like around like solicitation, like, oh, like I'll go out with you, but it'll cost you X amount of dollars. Like that, even that's not overly prevalent. But it does happen, right? Oddly enough, even Instagram got nailed for that a little while ago. So it's more like the dating app is more, particularly talking to my more female friends than male friends, is like unsolicited pictures getting sent to you, right? As if like that is the turning point of let me show you my junk, and now you're gonna like it's just not
I always wondered why that, like, it has to work for some people, because I don't know why
if you do something 100 times and you write 1 out of 10,
so you're gonna score somewhere.
Exactly. 1 out of 1,000, like the game of numbers, right?
And so I think same kind of thing. They're looking like actively, like, how do we support our users? How do we create a good experience? Limiting, like filters on like types of words and language. Once sociologists, for example, are really good in tech because you understand human behavior.
Yeah.
And that's where you're trying to get in there, is like within the scope of human behavior, what is this person really trying to do? What is the type of interaction they're hoping to have? Those are the kind of things you're looking at when evaluating content, say like in dating or gaming or even on a platform.
Wow. That's crazy.
Never looked at it in that perspective.
Nice. Yeah, me neither.
Sign on and start scrolling.
Even like the video game stuff, man. That's just fascinating. So aside from the recruiting stuff that goes on in video games, are they also looking for like the bullying type of stuff, or
bullying's on there? Like, particularly, I know we're all like athletic, do sports. Like, we're not immune to trash talk, right? So there might be trash talking. There might be within the game. So particularly, like if you have younger kids in a gaming, like being aware of what is the level of gaming in there. For parents, encouraging them like, hey, play the game with your kid, and kind of teach them that behavior.
Get a little vibe.
Teach them how to talk crap, right?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, that's not where we're going with.
But then how do you respond to that environment? Like, I was talking to a buddy recently who just at a Giants game, and a guy was there from, supporting the other team with his kid, and it was the kid's first game. He's super excited. And another fan of the home team was just trying to emasculate the dad in front of his kid. And he got in there. He's like, you're not ruining this for him. Like, there's no reason for you to go after the dad like that. So I think for some people it's hard to sort of differentiate that. So if you can have like those, particularly if you're just getting like those teachable moments, or what happens is if you get into a game and get totally trashed, you're probably not going to come back to that game anymore. So there's huge value into a company thinking like, oh, we just got this person to buy the game. We want them to keep playing. So how do we create a good experience?
Keep them retained.
You come in and jump
because otherwise you're going to spend 3 times as much trying to win them back.
This is very true. Yeah, that's so true. I mean, that's actually true in all business.
Customer retention.
Retention, because that's what I always think. Like the main intent of most business is to how long you can keep your customer. Basically, that's why it's always interesting to me. Like when the basis of like social media platforms is to make you engage, even though they know that generally most people are not engaging in a healthy manner. So it's like they're saying, use my platform, but it's unhealthy. But don't use it's kind of like saying go to McDonald's, but don't eat too much. Like
just enough, just to stay interested.
Exactly. But just come back enough, but not too much, because then you'll die too soon. And then
that's right. And you start to see, right? You'll see like those break points, or you see like nudge behavior, where it's just like, hey, you've been on here a while, like you should take a break. And so
like Netflix.
I think.
Yes, of course I'm watching.
Just keep going.
It's
I'll take 11:30
a break in 3
more episodes.
It's only been 6 episodes.
Of course I'm still watching.
So I do think there's a shift in thinking to get more towards that, like that healthy balance and having those conversations. And I also see particularly younger generations who are now growing up with tech, because like I did not grow up with it in the same way. So now as a younger group, I think is seeing the behavior or their own experiences are starting to shift their thinking on how the relationship they want with tech themselves. And what does that look like? Because there's been, we could talk about CSAM and grooming, and I could share some stories with you, and you're just like, I'm going to delete my phone kind of thing. But the flip side, like there's a lot of good that's happening, right? Where individuals, like they're essentially finding their tribe online.
Absolutely.
People they can identify with, groups, things that they can do that make them feel good about themselves, or to kind of discover a new project or hobby. And that's where, we try to find encourage people to like look for the good, figure out what's going on. I think we can have conversations about the bad stuff. And then most of us know intrinsically, if we're online and like something just doesn't feel right, then that's a good moment to either walk away, put the app down, look at something else, and just kind of create a break to where it's like, okay, I shouldn't be doing this right now. Like something's off.
You mean we shouldn't engage in arguing constantly?
I told you every time.
That's been a rule I've had to implement, is to never argue with people
you don't,
online.
But maybe people in your comments do.
People in my comments will, which is entertaining to me. But no, like I'll never argue with somebody online, and I'll never argue with people I don't personally know. And
I found like face to face, more people agree than disagree.
Yeah, you're not gonna. Well, and the funny thing is, it's like, I think there's two parts to that, right? Like it's different when you're standing in front of somebody, and I have a theory. Part of it is the room for violence is there. Number one, especially
immediate violence.